Our guest today evening is Dr. Arjun Dang, partner and CEO of Dr. Dang's Lab. How did you evaluate the choice of continuing in diagnostic versus something else, and what were some of the other choices that you evaluated?
Since it is a scalable model wherein you talk about diagnostics and it can easily reach the masses, I think it is more it was more relevant for me to actually step into that field where I already had the base set up.
Why don't you talk us about Discover by Dangs?
Now, the entire issue is that both Arjun and Vivek, although we are males of 35 years of age, our past history, our medical history, our family history, and more importantly, our health goals are completely different. There might be someone else who has major gut issues, someone who has IBS, maybe someone wants to work on their sleep and mood. So we have a large number of these goals. And once you enter into that, if you're an existing DANGS patient, then we have an algorithm that looks at your longitudinal data and also adds your abnormal tests from your previous reports into the curated package.
Another factor is if I have to say, for example, choose a dentist or choose any specialist, I would usually ask my friends, when I'm visiting a lab for my checkup, how much does the skill and competency of the pathologist matter?
The intervention of a pathologist is critical. I've seen the best of machines give an incorrect report. The pathologist has to actually identify that the machine is giving this, but it's probably not the right value because it's not correlating with the symptoms of the patient. I mean, there will be some value where you feel that, okay, this value is not correct, but the machine is very confidently giving you that value. And that is where human expertise comes in.
So what are some of such innovations in the diagnostic space and specifically in the pathology space that you are closely watching?
I think in the years to come, innovation is going to be more technology driven, where we look at, it's not just a super app, it's something that is a small chip and your entire lab is inside that chip, what I just spoke about. It's a little glucose monitor right now, but tomorrow it will probably be as big as the huge machine that we have that runs hundreds of tests. I think testing right there and giving the report right there with absolutely no infrastructure, no manpower required, while I still feel that is many years away and that's going to disrupt the entire industry. And a lot of people might not agree with me, but I mean, that is something that I really look forward to seeing innovation in that segment.
Hi viewers, I'm Vivek Sinha, the founder and CEO of Emversity, and I welcome you all to this healthcare focused podcast series, The Prognosis. So the idea behind launching this podcast was to help create next generation of leaders for the healthcare industry. And we thought, what could be a better way to do this than let leaders of today groom leaders of tomorrow? So in each episode in the podcast, we'll be talking to a top CEO or an entrepreneur from the healthcare industry. So if you're an industry professional or a clinician or an entrepreneur building for the healthcare industry, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is brought to you by the Emversity team. We are a training and recruitment platform for the healthcare industry. We do two things in service of our mission, which is to address the global shortage of doctors, nurses, and allied healthcare workers. First, we run work-integrated degrees and diploma programs, which are curated along with the top healthcare companies and NACA Plus universities. And second, we also run an online jobs marketplace called Resume with an RX. Now, Resume is a portal which is a 10 times smarter way of getting hired by a top healthcare company in India. All right, let's dive right in. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Prognosis. Our guest today evening is Dr. Arjun Dang, partner and CEO of Dr. Dang's Lab. Welcome to the show, Arjun.
Thank you, Vivek. It's a pleasure being here.
Arjun, why don't you tell our viewers about yourself, about your experiences, and about your setup?
Firstly, thank you for having me and super excited for this conversation. And I've been born and did my schooling in Delhi. And I belong to a family of doctors. And so my grandfather, he's no more, but he was the first doctor in the family. And so is my father and my mother both. And they set up a pathology lab in Delhi way back in 1983. And I still remember the pictures I've seen and the stories that they've told me is that it was 100 square feet area. And we still have that first clinic that they had started. And they had basically 2 employees, that is my mother and my father. I still have a report from 1985 where It's the lab report that's gone out with my mother's handwriting. And literally, the hemoglobin and the blood counts were written in her writing. So, with very humble beginnings, is where they had started. And initially, my father was in All India Institute. And that's when my mother actually urged him to start their own practice. And they started with very humble beginnings and from that very small place. And then slowly and steadily, obviously, focusing on patients and how to give them better services and better quality. With God's grace, today we have two laboratories in Delhi NCR, one in Delhi and one in Gurgaon. Along with that, we have a dozen collection centers and patient service centers as well. And we service a lot of Delhiites. Also, we have a pan-India presence for specialized testing for a lot of projects that we also do. We have various centers of excellence in the lab itself where we focus on specific disease domains. And as far as my story goes, Vivek, I was a typical South Delhi boy. And in 11th grade, I had the very drastic option of either taking science or pursuing something else. And I still remember that conversation. It was my dadu that time, my grandfather. And he just told me one thing very simply. And he said that, Arjun, if you have to do something, it has to have a great community impact. And so I started thinking that what is the area, irrespective of what my family legacy is and what my parents do, where I can make a great impact. And obviously, the writing was on the wall. It was quite clear. I had a foothold in the healthcare domain. But one thing that I continuously pursue and try to do is to increase our footprint so that the healthcare services that we provide not only goes to a larger community segment, but also to weave in a lot of innovation along with delivering a very high level of quality care is something that I decided to do. Post that, I did my MBBS and my MD down south in Chennai, and post which I worked at Indraprasth Apollo Hospital. I specialized in a branch of pathology known as histopathology there. Post which I also worked at Lady Hardinge Medical College because again, it was always a dream that I work in a government hospital. And I was there for about 6 months. And that time I got into King's College Hospital in London, where I did a research fellowship in liver and GI histopathology. So that is again a subspecialization of histopathology. Histopathology, for you to understand, is the study of biopsies and tissues and the microscopy basis which we make the diagnosis. And post my tenure in London, I came back, I joined the lab. And at that point of time, when I came back in 2017, we were a single lab setup and just one single lab. And so that is when our expansion primarily started. And after that, we have obviously expanded through Delhi and now doing a lot of projects pan India as well. Apart from that, my specialization is in the field of GI and liver pathology. But also, a few years back, I started training in the field of allergies and immunology. And this is also a segment that I feel requires a lot of attention. It also requires a lot of senior doctors who need to be trained in this particular field. Right now, if you look at allergies, it is either pediatricians or dermatologists or ENTs who handle these. But I really feel like, unlike the West, where you do have a lot of allergists and immunologists, India is actually lacking that currently. And even if you look at the prevalences of allergies, they have increased by about 30% in the past decade. And so I thought of pursuing that field, and only recently I was certified in allergies and immunology by YACI as well. YACI is the European Academy of Allergies and Clinical Immunology. So this is also a field where I have a lot of interest and hope to give better services to the community with this.
Wow, amazing. That's an amazing journey. Let's rewind a bit, Arjun. Standard 12, you are contemplating whether to take biology or something else. Growing up in a family of doctor, did you actually have an option of not taking medicine?
Yes, so that's a very relevant question. But I was always the rebel in my family. I was always the one who used to do exactly opposite to what my parents preach. So at that point of time, the decision was left to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I made the right decision that time, because with the base that I had in Delhi NCR, I think to build upwards from it has been a great privilege. Also, during my time in London, I had this critical point where I had to make a decision whether I move back to India or I stay there. And obviously, my wife also had a part to play in it.
Is
And
she also a doctor?
no, she's not a doctor. So
Thankfully.
I was coming to that, and obviously that breaks the monotony. And she's from a completely different industry, and that's a great pleasure. But otherwise, even coming back from London was a very thoughtful decision, and obviously with that crystal clear focus of making a larger impact on the community is something that motivated me to come back.
Sure, sure. When you are born in a family, and not just successful parent, but parents who came from very limited means and built a lot of things only due to their incredible work ethic, it puts a certain kind of expectation and pressure on you as well. So how was growing up as a child in such a family?
So Vivek, I remember this short anecdote that I'll tell you. And always, so when our mother or father used to be dropping us to the school, me and my sister, my mother and father used to be stopping on the way and doing a couple of home collections. And I mean, for a senior pathologist to be going to someone's house and drawing their blood, but that's how they actually, their work ethos was like that. And I remember my mother telling me that in case the patient comes out to see us, just duck down in the car, because it doesn't look nice that I'm dropping my children to school and I am coming for a home collection as well. So, I mean, from that time when my father had to sell his two-wheeler to get a microscope and bring another machine in, I mean, they've been through the hardest of times. And so I think I have a great deal of respect from that, and also a lot of learnings. And of course, we've been very privileged to have all the resources. But obviously, at the roots, I do understand that humility is key, on the basis of which any legacy is built.
When I was doing some research on you, I came across this post on your LinkedIn about your grandfather. It was a very thoughtful post. Why did you talk about your relationship with your grandfather, how it shaped your life, how it shaped your personality, how it shaped who you are today?
So I think, Vivek, like I said in that post, excellence in your field, dedication, that is hard work, and also working with a lot of focus, I think is extremely important. But I think at the other side is also the blessings of our elders. Now, that is what I wrote in that post about as well. And so my grandfather was a revered physician from the time of the partition. And he had these stories about actually conducting various surgeries, working in the emergency department when he was just an MBBS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point of time, maybe 7-8 decades ago, I mean, an MBBS doctor was the one who was doing everything.
Yeah.
I still remember he used to charge 10 rupees in 2015 in his clinic in West Delhi. And I used to tell him that, Dadu, why are you charging 10 rupees? He's like, just to keep count. Because the patients who come to me, for me, it's providing my services to them. But that small amount helps me keep a count of how many patients I've seen in the day.
This was which year? Around what
So
time?
yes, this is about 10 years back.
Wow.
And at that time he was about 90 years old.
And he was still actively practicing.
He had hearing aids in both his ears, but constantly just wanting to give back to society. And I think till the last moment as well, he only explained to us how important that is. And I think one person who's the most happy at our successes, even yours for that matter of fact, is our elders, and who actually gave a lot. And I think we owe a large part of our success to them.
Do you have siblings as well, Arjun?
Yes, I have a sister. She's a pathologist as well.
Wow.
And running the lab along with me.
Okay, that's quite predictable. I hope the future of the career of your children are not already planned.
No. So broadly, what I advise all my friends as well is that for the next generation, we should definitely look at other countries and other cities apart from Delhi. So probably not that.
Sure. So, Arjun, one aspect of being born into a successful parent is the platform that it comes with being born in that. So let's say parents with network, with reasonable amount of money to, let's say, support you in every dream that you take. So you could have taken any path and done reasonably well, because it's not just that you inherited something, but you also worked for so many years, logged for so many years, super specialty after super specialty. Had you put in this much of effort in any other field, I think you would have done exceedingly well. Uh, how did you evaluate the choice of continuing in diagnostic versus something else, and what were some of the other choices that you evaluated?
So I think, Vivek, one critical factor of diagnostics was that it, at least that is what the stereotype was. I might not think exactly the same now, but it permits a very good work-life balance.
Okay.
And because it's something where you can have a team in place and all the operations in place, and you don't have any such emergencies like a surgeon would. I mean, I think that was a critical factor as well. And obviously, having a base and having that goodwill among the physicians, I think that was also something that prompted me to proceed with this direction. And also, above all, I also felt that since it is a scalable model wherein you talk about diagnostics and it can easily reach the masses, I think it is more it was more relevant for me to actually step into that field where I already had the base set up. And that is why instead of pursuing any other field of healthcare, this seemed like a good choice.
Why don't you take us through the scale, the complexity of your setup, Dr. Dang's laboratory? How help us understand what you guys do. What's the kind of scale on a daily basis? What kind of complexity do you deal in your business?
So, Vivek, actually, what has happened after the pandemic, and I think I will start with that, is that diagnostics overall has painted a very lucrative image in the market. And you'll see
people think that all diagnostic labs are minting money.
Exactly. And I think this was after the pandemic when there was a lot of noise about COVID tests, when it was practically impossible to get a COVID test. Even if you got one, you didn't get the report. And everyone was just talking about diagnostics and tests. I think that is where we had a lot of people jump on the bandwagon. It might be the big hospital chains, it might be the pharma players, it might be the e-commerce guys. I think everyone thought that it's a sweet spot, it's an evergreen industry, and why not jump on the bandwagon? But I feel that broadly, when you look at diagnostics, there are a lot of complexities because of the multiple moving parts that you have. It is a patient that is somewhere who gives a sample, a phlebotomist is supposed to reach in time, collect the sample. That sample moves to the lab. You have to maintain the integrity of the sample. There are different departments in the lab. It goes through each and every department, through each and every machine, and then eventually a report is generated. So I feel the complexities of diagnostics and actually the focus that you need to have an error-free system is something that is not considered as important, or there is a lack of focus on that. When I say that as well, I also include the various layers of quality and excellence in service that a provider can actually inculcate. I would tell you a simple example. And I think, okay, so again, a very interesting fact, but pre-pandemic, there were 100,000 labs in India. I was reading a recent survey, and now there are 300,000 labs in India. So in the past 5 years, you've seen a significant jump of almost 3x. But so I've had the privilege of working in labs in India and abroad. But I'll give you a few examples wherein things that we do are probably not replicated anywhere else. I mean, you would have heard of a simple CBC test. That's a complete blood count test. Yeah. Now, in any lab in the world, obviously, all labs, hospital labs and specialty labs today have access to very specialized instruments and very specialized modules to analyze the samples. But what we've done since day one and till date is that any complete blood count that comes in after the best of machines actually reporting it, there's a pathologist who looks at the slide. Now, as a protocol in a lot of these other institutes and very revered labs I've worked in, they have a set of criteria that if the machine gives, say, these 2 abnormalities or these 3 abnormalities, basis that criteria, a pathologist will look at the slide. But our legacy of reporting includes every CBC to be scanned by a pathologist. Now, how does that actually help? I mean, apart from having a lot of doctors on your payroll, the way it helps, Vivek, is that we are able to catch and detect and diagnose timely a lot of incidental findings. For example, a simple CBC, if you look at the slide, can pick up a malaria infection that the machine won't tell you. Things like CLL, that's again a kind of blood disorder in the elderly. We pick up a lot of those when people come for their general wellness packages and checkups. So, I mean, that part, that human intervention, that doctor expertise, when you actually look at a slide rather than having even the best of equipments report out your sample, is still unparalleled. I mean, these machines come with inbuilt AI and ML and have hordes of data stored in them. But I think that doctor's touch or an expert's touch with those years of experience looking at a slide, I think is unparalleled right now. And this is just one of the many examples where we have a lot of doctors actually in the processes that are performed in the lab, rather than just being dependent on technicians and the doctor sitting virtually and just authenticating reports. I mean, I think that is one thing on the quality side, that's a lot of doctor intervention. And also the entire narrative, Vivek, about delivering care. Our agenda is to move that narrative from delivering care to caring. Now, I don't know how many people would understand what is the difference, but delivering care is something that is a product that you're delivering through a service. But caring about a particular patient who's walking in through those doors, and where you're consistently delivering high quality care with a very high clinical orientation, I think that is what we strive to do. The quality ethos percolates down from the management, but even any employee at any level actually feels that, okay, how can I add value to the patient experience? And I mean, I have a lot of such stories, but I mean, overall, in the departments of providing service and then providing quality, there's a lot of work that is done on a daily basis.
Great. I actually had planned to ask you a question because we keep on hearing a lot about how AI and machines are going to replace us humans. So I was, during the course of this conversation, I had thought of asking you, when are we going to walk into a Dr. Dang's new lab wherein there will be no pathologists, only machines? Looks like the answer is not very soon.
Yes. So, how I look at AI and its intervention into adding more value to diagnostics is that it'll always assist the doctor and it'll always assist the lab in triaging samples. So that means that you look at those samples that need urgent attention. It will also create a very dependable ecosystem where you're looking at the same number of patients but spending lesser time, so that enables the doctor to spend his time actually giving better and more volumes of service. But of course, I mean, I see both me and you are wearing the Apple Watch. I mean, that just goes to show that there are a lot of health parameters that we are also being able to monitor on a daily basis.
Sure.
I hate saying this, but perhaps in 20 years from now, there will be no lab. There will be a lab in a small chip that is probably on a wristband or maybe as a little implant on your bicep that actually measures all the analytes in your blood. And maybe if we speak about year 2050, this might sound like an episode of Black Mirror, but you know those continuous glucose monitors, right, that people have?
Yeah.
So what that basically does is that it tells you your glucose readings over a period of time, puts it in a very nice data format on your phone and your mobile app. So the vision of the digitization process would be that right now the sensor that is measuring the blood sugar is actually going to relay that value to your care provider or your doctor or your team of doctors. They'll see that blood sugar value and they'll say, okay, so this is Vivek's blood sugar at 9 a.m. This was his blood sugar at 6 a.m. And this is above what we had expected it to be. So why not? Why don't we do these 2 more tests that will help us evaluate his kidney function? So from the same sensor, they will give an instruction to the sensor that will prompt the sensor to measure those parameters. And in case those parameters are also above the reference range, then depending on what needs to be activated, for example, if there's a life-threatening situation and someone's blood sugar is above normal, creatinine is also significantly elevated, they will probably just order an ambulance to pick you up, or they'll send a specialist to you. Or if there are 3 medicines that you need to take, you are just sitting comfortably in your bed and they'll be delivered right there. So I think overall, when we look at technology and AI, it is going to make healthcare more patient-centric. Right now, if you look at how healthcare is delivered, it's the patient that is running around from a lab to a clinic to a hospital to a pharmacy. Later, everything will be revolving around the patient, and I feel that's how it should be. And I think technology is enabling us to do that faster than ever before.
Wow, that's incredible. So on a lighter note, shall we actually expect to see a Theranos-like company where just in a drop of blood, how far is that future?
So I hope there is a company like that, but not like Theranos. But otherwise, there is a lot of innovation in that segment where small amount of blood can actually help us measure a large number of analytes. I think also the key innovation area in this would not be the amount of blood, because that is never a critical factor whether you draw say 1 ml or you draw 10 ml. I think it is also going to be point of care testing, what your glucose monitor was doing, and how we can have more analytes and more parameters being measured accurately and consistently delivering that high quality in their results at your bedside. I think that is also what we are moving towards. There's a large world out there in the field of genomics, and I think AI also has a major role to play in that one.
Great. Why don't you talk us about Discover by Dangs? So I got a chance to check your website. I think a very innovative concept, but would love to understand more about that. But before that, would love to understand the pain point or the core insight that you had when you imagined building this. Why did you thought of coming up with this?
So, Vivek, since I'm from a family of pathologists and very well acquainted with the entire process of how these tests happen, I mean, from high school, I always used to wonder that if there are 2 people, for example, let's talk about me and you, and hypothetically, both of us are 35 years old, and we walk into a lab, and hypothetically, if you're not from the healthcare industry, currently we walk into a lab and we decide our tests based on 2 very basic parameters. So one is your basic medical knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, so one is your age, your gender. So you have your 35-year-old package, silver package, gold package,
Sure.
platinum package for elderly. So one is your basic knowledge, and sometimes you might say, okay, add a cholesterol or do a diabetes test. My grandfather had that, or please add thyroid, because I've been hearing everyone has thyroid and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's our basic knowledge. And second, of course, is our budget. That do we want to spend 1,000, 5,000 or 10,000 and test basis that. Now, the entire issue is that both Arjun and Vivek, although we are males of 35 years of age, our past history, our medical history, our family history, and more importantly, our health goals are completely different.
Sure.
For example, suppose you work out a lot and your goal is to get more fit and build more muscle, whereas my goal might just be longevity. There might be someone else who has major gut issues, someone who has IBS. Maybe someone wants to work on their sleep and mood. Maybe there's a girl who wants to work on a hormonal issues or PCOS. I mean, even sexual well-being is one of the goals that you can select. So we have a large number of these goals. And once you enter into that, if you are an existing DANGS patient, then we have an algorithm that looks at your longitudinal data and also adds your abnormal tests from your previous reports into the curated package. Now, the interesting part about this, Vivek, also is that every test that is recommended for you, for example, if you're a vegetarian, Discover is going to recommend a B12 test for you because B12, vitamin B12 is primarily found in non-vegetarian food items. But next to that test, there is a peer-reviewed publication that validates the authenticity of the test. So that people and physicians and patients who actually want to read it and understand why was this test suggested, they actually get the scientific evidence behind it as well.
Sure. For the sake of our viewers, why don't you give us an overview of diagnostic industry as a whole, as a vast umbrella? What are the various sub-segments within the industry? Pathology, radiology. There are newer segments like molecular diagnostic, point of care diagnostic. So why don't you give us an overview of how the industry looks like? What are the various sub-segments within the overarching term that we use as diagnostics?
Of course. So Vivek, how I would actually define diagnostics in very simple terms for our viewers is that the tools that help the doctor make the correct diagnosis and then give the corrective action and management. Now, these tools can either be something where you are doing a scan and you look at a particular tissue, or that is radiology. And the other side of it broadly encompasses a lot of different techniques. We'll call it as pathology, and I'll go underneath that. Now, even in radiology, there are subsegments, but broadly for you to understand, it is viewing of various body parts and tissues directly through a particular machine that might or might not use radiation, but it creates a film that the doctor sees and then detects any kind of abnormality. In pathology, there are various tests that are done from your blood and other body fluids as well. This can be broadly divided into pathology, microbiology, biochemistry, molecular biology, and so on and so forth. But broadly, microbiology is the study of infections, wherein you have various bacteria and viruses. Molecular biology is more about this technique that we call as PCR. Everyone learned about the RT-PCR with COVID during the pandemic. And also, biochemistry would include all your basic parameters, like your liver, your kidney, your lipids, your basic other hormones, etc., all come under biochemistry and immunoassays. And then you have pathology, where you actually look at various kind of components such as your biopsies and even your blood tests and see slides, and involves a lot of microscopy. And then you make a diagnosis basis what you see inside the cells. So broadly, when you look at diagnostics, it would encompass all these.
Sure. There's a lot of, I would say, both positivity as well as, so when we look at from the investor side, there's a very active interest in the diagnostic space, a lot of money coming in, a lot of consolidation happening. So larger healthcare platform rolling up, smaller practices. What are the 2 or 3 macro trend because of which the whole industry is so bullish about the industry, about diagnostic as a sector?
So, Vivek, I completely agree with you. There is a lot of consolidation that we are seeing right now, and also post the pandemic. And I would say in about 21, 22, we saw a lot of these large M&A deals as well. And I think that entire picture of lucrativeness and the simple term that entrepreneurs keep saying again and again, how scalable is the model? I mean, that also is something that has motivated a lot of these investors to get on the bandwagon. But I think broadly, when they look at various tier 2, tier 3 segments also and cities, and they see the number of labs versus the number of the people or the population, there's a huge gap. And for them to actually enter those cities and those smaller towns, there is a lot of scope of actually doing good work in those areas. And I think it's these underserved regions. And also, if you look at metropolitans, I mean, even there was a recent study that said it's just about 1 out of 5 people who've ever done their blood tests, even in the larger cities. So there's a lot of scope. I also see the pie significantly growing because of the increasing levels of awareness.
Sure.
And I think during COVID, unfortunately, we just saw that we lost a lot of human lives, and the way that people have actually perceived it, and I would say till a certain extent it might be correct, is that your immunity and your previous tests and how much you've taken care of your inner health really matters. And I think even anyone who is not as privileged today would want to do a wellness check just to understand where they are and if they need any medical intervention. So I think broadly the pie growing, the major gaps in the market, and that demand supply difference that we see right now, I think that is what is causing this focus on the industry and the consolidation that we are seeing.
And the pie growing, what is contributing more? Rising instance of chronic diseases in the population, or awareness and hence the preventive side of the diagnostic side is also growing? What's the major driver?
So I think it's more like chicken and egg. Because of the NCDs rising, the awareness is obviously growing, because now we always see someone around us in our extended family, in our friend circle, who suddenly has a disease, and then they are going through that. So obviously the person gets worried, and obviously they do want to test. But also at this point of the conversation, Vivek, I would like to add that a lot of times people do tests just for their peace of mind. And I mean, these bundled packages, this one size fits all approach is something I think it is good for mental health at the end of the day. But are you really checking what you need to check in your blood tests? I mean, the entire industry and these investors actually talk about the cost per test and the bundled cost of each package, and the bottom line and the top line. But I think the narrative should move from cost per test to value per test. I mean, instead of doing the same 3 tests that are irrelevant to you, you would rather do a test that is more relevant, and then you can actually have an actionable insight provided to you from your doctor that's going to make a significant difference to your life.
You mentioned about under capacity of labs let's say per capita of population, and I'm assuming compared to what the WHO recommends or compared to some advanced geographies. But at the same time, I was also reading that there are more than 1 lakh pathology labs in the country, out of which 5,000 or 10,000 odds are NABL accredited, if I'm not wrong. Do you see this trend as very dangerous, because the other 90% of the labs which are functioning have no accredited body certifying what they are doing, what processes they are following, what kind of employees they have, whether they are credentialed or not, what sort of reagents or consumable they are using? How bad is the shape of the industry when you go on the unorganized side?
So Vivek, I won't call it bad. I would call it that it is in the process of getting better. Because with the kind of technology that we have now, I mean, we see a lot of labs in the tier 1 cities and the metropolitans, but obviously the underserved areas like we were talking about still has a large amount of room to improve. And I feel that technology coming in, a lot of make in India instruments also that are available, that are easy for these small labs actually to place and then have a reagent rental model. I think it is improving. And I think also a lot of it is also dependent on the availability of pathologists. You said 100,000 pathology labs, but actually it's 300,000 now in the past 3 years after the pandemic. And if you look at the total number of pathologists in the country, they're not even 30,000. So, I mean, that's a huge gap. So, by the latest guidelines of NABL also, you do need a pathologist stationed in the lab to authenticate these reports. So I think also from education perspective, and you would know better on that, I mean from a skilling perspective, to actually generate more lab specialists or pathologists or biochemists or even microbiologists is critical to actually plug that gap moving ahead.
Sure. So when a patient walks into a hospital, generally, and we Indians walk into hospital only when it is life-threatening or only if somebody is in acute pain. But it's slightly different in case of, let's say, pathology or diagnostic. To a layman, one lab versus other lab, especially among the branded, there's absolutely, zero difference. And to a layman won't be able to assess whether a lab is franchised, non-franchised, etc., so on. Give us a ready reckoner. If I am to, the next time I want to go for a checkup, I have to select a lab. What are the factors I should look at?
Okay, so very relevant question, and I'm glad that you brought this up. But the one advice that I give to everybody when they're getting any tests done is that choose to go to a lab rather than do a home visit. Okay. Especially in the non-winter months where temperature, and especially in a place like Delhi when you have soaring temperatures. But try and find a lab where the processing is taking place immediately when you give
after
your
the
sample.
collection. Okay.
Yes. So that is important for a lot of parameters, whereas there are some routine parameters that can also be collected at home. But for your critical tests, try and choose a lab that is close to you. So vicinity is definitely a criteria. Second, from a perspective of quality, I completely agree with you that prima facie, it's very tough to really make out what a lab is really doing. And I don't know if many people are aware about this, but when a lab calls themselves NABL, it doesn't mean that the test that they're performing for you is under the scope of NABL accreditation. So that basically means that suppose a lab has a test menu of hypothetically 100 tests, and they only have 3 tests that are hemoglobin and say liver function and a couple of other parameters that are under the accredited scope. Their marketing material might say NABL, but if they are doing a test for you, that's really not under NABL scope. So I mean, if it is a specialized or a critical test, you can always ask the lab, is this under the NABL scope? Because obviously NABL does provide a good standard of guidelines. And if they are following that, then obviously that affects your quality of your reports as well.
Another factor is if I have to say, for example, choose a dentist or choose any specialist, I would usually ask my friends, because the skill of the surgeon matters, the skill of the nephrologist suggesting whether the person has done DM nephrology or not. So you ask those questions about the person as well, right? When I'm visiting a lab for my checkup, how much does the skill and competency of the pathologist matter? And what part is, let's say, has become idiot proof because of machines and AI and technology evolving so much?
So Vivek, a lot of people ask me this question as well, that we went to lab X and lab Y and we got very similar reports. So that means the quality of the two labs is similar. So that is absolutely incorrect. Why I say that is because when we talk about accuracy of reports, it is not Vivek's report with lab X and lab Y. It is probably 1,000 Viveks and their samples, and then you look at the accuracy and precision difference. So there might be a lab that might have a higher error rate, that is say 7%, 8%, 9%, or maybe 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, vis-a-vis another lab that is again 0.0001, 0.002. So I mean, with so many moving parts and with so many different things in place, it's about how to minimize errors, it's about how to maximize accuracy, and obviously the sensitivity of the machines that you use. So I think it is not that one person tested and reports were same. It's over a larger cohort that you actually compare two labs and look at quality. Like I said, Vivek, the second part of your question, the intervention of a pathologist is critical. And I will say this on this forum where anyone can hear me say it. But I've seen the best of machines give an incorrect report. The pathologist has to actually identify that the machine is giving this, but it's probably not the right value because it's not correlating with the symptoms of the patient. Sure. And eventually you go back and take history, and that obviously gives you more insights, and then you run the test in a particular way, or on a fresh sample, or on a backup platform or a different machine that actually gives you the right value. And we encounter this on a daily basis. I mean, there will be some value where you feel that, okay, this value is not correct, but the machine is very confidently giving you that value. And that is where human expertise comes in.
There will also be a factor of the business model. So while choosing a lab, there are standalone labs, there are these branded labs, and there are labs inside hospitals. Does a business model selection also dilute quality in one model versus the other?
So Vivek, I think now that systems and processes, even in these larger hub and spoke model pan-India labs, are extremely robust. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I feel the franchisee model can always make it more challenging to keep up the standards of excellence in service and quality.
You don't have franchises, by the way.
No, we have all company-owned, company-operated centers.
And do you also have collection centers, or?
Yes. So these are patient service centers, and
but managed and run by you.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So, Vivek, another thing that you must understand about diagnostics is that a lion's share of errors in the industry happen in the pre-analytical phase.
Oh, okay.
Pre-analytical phase is before the samples enters for analysis in the lab. So it's how you draw the sample, it's how the sample is transported, it's the kind of vials that you're using. So a lot of errors, labeling especially, a lot of errors happen in that segment as well.
But I've rarely seen any lab coming back to me and requesting for a second sample because the first sample was, let's say, it got spoiled during transition or any time.
I would not like to comment more on this point.
I have a follow-up question on that.
It might be confidential, but otherwise, I would say that I think there is a small percentage where, as in, I won't like to comment how they release that report if there was an issue with the sample, but it's very frequent that you might get such issues. And there are ways of running the test, but a lot of times you can also ask for a repeat sample for a more unbiased and a better report.
Sure. I have a follow-on question to that, actually. So we did the first episode of the show with Prashant Tandon of 1mg, and that was the day when I first learned about this word called sync test. So sync, you must be aware, but sync test is basically when the laboratory doesn't actually conduct the investigation, you just throw it at the sink. 99% gross margin business. How prevalent sync test actually is?
So Vivek, I think because if you look at the industry right now, you will see that even the larger chains, if you look at the pan-India and the regional chains, they still form a very small percentage, and largely the sector is unorganized. And the unorganized sector, if you put the hospital labs that we call as HLMs aside, I think these are standalone doctor-run pathology labs, and these can be servicing anywhere from say 20 to 200 patients in a day. And I really feel that even if there is something called a sync test and people are doing a sync test, I think it is not something that the industry encourages at all. I don't think there's any data available on that as well. And I just feel and I just hope and pray that this practice, even if it exists, doesn't continue in the future.
Let's talk about the business model innovation. We already talked about the innovation in technology and artificial intelligence and how it is reshaping diagnostic. Let's talk about business model innovation now. The first innovation was probably done by Dr. Lal's Path Lab at scale when they came up with this whole model of collection centers. So thousands of collection centers collecting data. The second big innovation was probably by Thyrocare, that they flipped the model wherein everything is coming to a central manufacturing facility type setup. What is the latest business model innovation that you find very exciting? I've seen players who are now committing that they will deliver results in 60 minutes for tests which usually takes 2 to 3 days. Some of these are there's a solid innovation in terms of non-clinical but logistical innovation behind it. So what are some of such innovations in the diagnostic space and specifically in the pathology space that you are closely watching?
So again, the list is long, Vivek, but I'll try and keep it to a couple of things that are really exciting and probably in the pipeline. But I do agree with you, the hub and spoke model and how to decentralize and democratize diagnostics was something that we saw with the likes of ThyroCare and LPL. I think in the years to come, it is more innovation is going to be more technology driven, where we look at it's not just a super app. It's something that is a small chip, and your entire lab is inside that chip. What I just spoke about. It's a little glucose monitor right now, but tomorrow it'll probably be as big as the huge machine that we have that runs hundreds of tests. So I think it's a combination of point of care testing, where the testing is happening right there and delivering you accurate results, and obviously the adoption of technology that also helps scientists collate all those data points that they are getting to build more robust tests and eventually give better, quicker, and more accurate results to patient. So I think it's going to be a mixture of both. I think also, again, when we look at AI, and I'll give you an example about the allergy test that we perform just to give it more context, is that till before we launched this particular test, it's called an Allergenius. Before we launched this test in India, there were thousands of labs who were doing a test for allergies, and so were we. And what happened in that test was that you give your blood, and your blood is tested for allergies to various food items and various respiratory allergens. Just for the sake of explaining, I'll take the example of milk. And you used to do a test. There's a particular test called the skin prick test, where they prick you on your arm and then take a reading that the physician usually does in their own clinic. Labs take a small amount of blood, and there's a system which analyzes various footprints of various food items. So till about a year and a half back, before we launched this test, we used to get to know about, are you allergic to milk, yes or no, and a particular value next to it that used to show you the grade of the allergy. With Allergenius, that is India's first AI-powered test. What it actually does is that when you look at milk, it detects allergies to various components of milk.
Right.
Now, your question will be, how does that really help the patient? If you're allergic to milk, you're still allergic to milk.
Yeah.
But what Allergenius does is that it looks at, so just for understanding again, I'll broadly divide the proteins inside milk into casein and whey.
Yeah.
Now, if someone is allergic to whey, you can bake the milk, you can boil it for a particular period of time, the molecule disintegrates and you will not have a reaction.
Sure.
Whereas if you're allergic to casein, no matter how much you heat or bake the particular milk, you're still going to get a reaction. There are certain allergens wherein there are certain treatments available. There are a lot of symptom-specific allergens. There are different proteins, some peanut proteins, for example. In my report, we also give guidance whether you should carry an EpiPen with you. So, I mean, the huge amount of data basis which we provide these actionable insights along with the reports. I think that is also something where the large amount of data that has been collected and again plugged on to the AI modules and the algorithms that we have, I think is something very exciting for the future, and eventually giving more actionable reports rather than just something that the patient doesn't really understand.
On that note, Arjun, why is allergy becoming so common these days? I mean, 2 decades or 3 decades ago, it used to be very rare, but now it is commonplace. What is contributing to it? Is it lifestyle? Is it pollution? Why is it becoming so common?
So again, Vivek, there are multiple points on this, but I think the one on top is going to be urbanization. And if you look at our forefathers and our grandfathers and everybody, the kind of nutrients and the kind of foods and the kind of environment that they were living in was completely different from what we are exposed to today. I was watching a documentary, and it was talking about how the irrigation process in the farms while cultivation of foods happens now versus earlier. You remember that drawing we used to make when we were kids in school with mountains and then a river flowing and then the green grass at the bottom? That doesn't happen anymore. And it is all artificial irrigation. Similarly, if you talk about how large-scale production of dairy and gluten is done today, our bodies haven't changed, but the grain, the way it's processed and cultivated has. So again, I think urbanization, exposure to different things, more toxic chemicals, they can be heavy metals, they can also be other toxic products that we come into contact with. Obviously, that has changed how our bodies respond to allergens. Also, exposure of allergens at a young age. For example, if we look at our forefathers, a lot of them were born in farms. So they were also exposed to a lot of allergens. I remember like even playing in sand pits now. I don't see many kids playing in sand pits. Their mother's going to tell them, please get out of the sand and don't dirty yourself.
In mud, never. But yeah, even sand pit is becoming uncommon.
Of course. So again, we've seen that in our generation as well. All this actually in a nutshell is the hygiene hypothesis. And that basically talks about that some germs are good. And some germs that children are exposed to actually build that immunity where they become stronger from inside and more capable of fighting these allergies and also infections. So again, hygiene hypothesis is on the top next to urbanization. Both of these go hand in hand. Also, there is a lot of literature that talks about cesarean sections and the vaginal microbiome that the baby is exposed to during delivery, again has a lot of beneficial factors and makes the immune system much stronger. I mean, apart from these 3-4 points, Vivek, it's also that allergies now are diagnosed better. Rather than if someone had an allergy till maybe a decade, 2 decades back, it wasn't diagnosed and doctors used to treat that empirically. So I think there are a lot of factors because of which we see this prevalence that's increasing.
On the point of our obsession towards hygiene, let's also talk about antimicrobial resistance. So I think until a few years ago, my family started using an antimicrobial soap in our bathroom. Then somewhere I read that it is also among, it's not just the antibiotics, but even these items of daily uses are contributing to the resistance. Why don't you educate our viewers about this topic?
Okay, so very interesting, Vivek, because again, this is an area of excellence of our lab, and infectious diseases is something that all of us encounter on a daily basis, from a small flu to your COVID to many other infections that unfortunately are circulating right now. Antibiotics, I think, is one of the greatest inventions in healthcare history. It has no doubt saved maybe millions and billions of lives. And if given at the right time to the right individual, I think it can have a significant change in the progress of the disease. Now, while I say that, I think overuse and misuse of these antibiotics over years have made the bacteria that cause infections stronger and more immune to actually being harmed or being cured by these antibiotics. I'll give a very simple example. The same mosquito repellent device that we used to plug into our rooms, now we see mosquitoes sitting on it and chilling and nothing happens to them. That's because the mosquito themselves, because of so much exposure to the mosquito repellent, they get stronger. They know how to actually ward off the particular repellent. And this is something that we call as antigenic shift and drift, where actually the microbe itself gets stronger if you keep exposing that particular microbe to the medicine, that is the antibiotic in this case. Now, what we are seeing, and I was also reading a study wherein the costs of dealing with these antibiotic resistant infections are 50 billion, and these are going to be in 2050, they are going to be 50 billion annual spends if we don't obviously nip this in the bud. What this basically means is that infections that were being treated by antibiotics in the past, Now we are getting cases where that same bacteria is resistant to that particular antibiotic. Now, in this case, even simple infections, if they go untreated, can lead to major complications. And this is also known as the silent pandemic, and rightly so, because the prevalence, again, we are seeing is increasing by leaps and bounds.
And the shift has happened in one generation, right? From our parents' generation to our generation.
Absolutely. We have witnessed it, unfortunately. And I think this is extremely important to find ways to actually tackle this, not only with awareness and also having stricter regulations when it comes to giving these antibiotics. But I also feel something that we took the lead in again, and because of the great work of our team, was that we introduced and opened doors to what we call as bacteriophage therapy in India.
Okay.
Now, this bacteriophage therapy was a way of introducing an alternate way of treating these antibiotic resistance cases. Phages are basically nothing but a cocktail of viruses. And for you to understand, we say that the river Ganges is clean because of these phages. And these are naturally found viruses that, if given in the right dosage and the right cocktail, can do a lot of benefits. These bacteriophages, if given in the right formulations, can provide a lot of benefit and a lot of improvement in these antibiotic resistant cases. And how we actually started this journey was by providing bacteriophage sensitivity testing. The same way that you do a culture right now in a lab to figure out which antibiotics are working, a bacteriophage sensitivity test tells you which bacteriophages will be appropriate. Also, this bacteriophage test is something that is easily accessible. We do it pan-India, we get hundreds of cases, and also, more importantly, from a costing perspective as well, because we wanted to raise awareness. The costing, again, is the same as a culture. So it's, again, very easily affordable. We work with a partner who then procures these phages, and till date, we've actually had a great response, a treatment response for more than 100 persons who've gotten this phage therapy.
Very interesting. Very interesting to see the obsession towards care and quality that you are able to ensure in your setup. But Arjun, on that note, as you scale from 3 to 13, right now it's a tightly knit setup of physicians coming from the same family, sharing the same value system which flows from the first generation entrepreneur, which was care, obsession towards quality. As you go to from 3 to 13, how do you ensure that these principles are inculcated in the newer setup, newer infrastructure that come in? How do you scale this part?
So Vivek, again, I think people ask me this question even when I opened the first patient service center that was 20 kilometers from our main lab. And they said, how will you uphold the same experience there? And I feel there's a very simple way of doing that, as in simple to explain, tough to do. And that's what you do, and that is training. And hands-on training, theoretical training, training the particular individual in such scenarios that are very intense, that are high stress, and then obviously try and make clones of the persons who actually have been working with you since decades, so they can deliver the same experience even remotely. I think training is something that is not given that much focus in the industry, and I'm so glad to hear that you're doing it so well. And obviously, these are paramedical staff that need most of the training, because even when a person goes for a home collection from a lab, no matter how big the lab is or how heavily funded it is,
the phlebo controls the experience.
Of course, absolutely. So a phlebotomist to have not only the soft skills but also the expertise. I mean, he's the beginning and the end of the experience that the patient is going to have, and that human touch is extremely important.
On that note, let's say if I have to break down the business of laboratory into three major cost component: manpower cost, the cost of reagent and consumables, and the amortization cost of machines. How does the training cost compare to other two costs? Is it significant? Let's say the manpower cost.
So I would say manpower cost is slightly more than the reagent cost,
Wow.
especially because a lot of labs now work on the reagent rental model, and all your routine tests, etc., are asset light. So you have a lot of vendors. If you give them a pre-committed volume, they will place an instrument there. But then again, I mean, it's also a function of what kind of manpower you have.
Sure.
And like I was saying, it's unfortunate, but there are virtually reporting pathologists as well. And obviously, if you have manpower of a certain level, then obviously it will come at a cost.
Sure. So, in a way, would it be fair to assume that one of the biggest input cost in the business of a pathology is manpower, right?
Absolutely. So manpower
And hence your focus on training of from the pathologist to the paramedic. Okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
absolutely.
An important question, and most of our viewers who watch this show, a lot of them are healthcare enthusiasts. Some of them are trying to build in healthcare. In the last video, I got some question about an entrepreneur who was trying to build in healthcare in the industry. So let's do this. Imagine if you have to put $1 million check in a new startup on a founder building in healthcare. What are the one or two areas that excite you the most? What's that new emerging sunshine, either technology or sector or sub-segment that would excite you?
Definitely point of care. So something that I told you that I'm afraid of personally, because all of us will be out of a job then, because there will be no lab. But
Okay.
I think testing right there and giving the report right there with absolutely no infrastructure, no manpower required, while I still feel that is many years away and that's going to disrupt the entire industry. And a lot of people might not agree with me. But I mean, that is something that I really look forward to seeing innovation in that segment. And that is somewhere I will put that $1 million check.
Wow. So for viewers watching this show, they already have the business plan. I'll leave Arjun's message for the $1 million check. I'll leave his email in the description. Okay, Arjun, final question. What's your the next big milestone that you are chasing? You already enjoy impeccable reputation in the Delhi NCR region, 3 locations. What next for you?
So, Vivek, I think obviously scale is something that's very critical. That is in the pipeline. And like
And
I
I've heard
said,
you are being chased by the private equity giants, the healthcare platforms.
so we've always been blessed to have a lot of interest from a lot of these very successful business entrepreneurs and private equities. But I think it is the team's good work and God's blessings. But when I look at, say, a 5 year or a 10-year goal, like I said, scaling is extremely critical. But scaling with your growth, not actually compromising your quality, is something that I am very motivated to see happen. And also how to build in the correct checks and balances so that from a report quality perspective and delivering the highest level of services, that the patient experience remains the same. I think that is a challenging task, but I think with the correct team members in place, and like I said, our elders' blessings, and of course, standing on the shoulders of giants, I think no such aim is too difficult to achieve.
Great, great. And how do you think the industry going ahead would evolve and your setup would evolve to, let's say, address holistic health and longevity diagnostic? Which way do you see it going ahead?
So, like I said, Vivek, there's a lot of work happening in that segment. Right now, the kind of diagnostics that are being done, you'll see that wellness forms just about double digits, about 12 to 15%. There are various studies where you do testing when you don't have any kind of medical condition or you don't have any kind of ailment. I see that pie growing bigger. I also feel that transforming from what we call wellness now and in the past few years, that transforming to more of longevity, people focusing more on health span rather than lifespan. There is going to be a deep dive into specialized testing even in the wellness arena, and of course functional medicine again. is something that is super exciting. And coming back to your $1 million question, that's also a field that's super exciting if you look at the West. And there are a lot of ways that one can actually modify their day-to-day life by just looking at other parameters rather than your basic biochemistry and your basic metabolic panel that we do right now. I mean, if you look back in till about 15 years back, there was no vitamin D test. And now vitamin D is considered a very, very basic test, and everyone wants to get it done. But I mean, vitamin D was probably just one of the many such things that diagnostics can actually open your eyes to and help you lead a healthy and a more productive life.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for doing this show with us, Arjun. And I must say that you are a great example of a second generation or a third generation entrepreneur who not only just scaled what you inherited, but you scaled it with a very high rate of compounding. I mean, you're still so hungry. Your work ethic is impeccable. How passionate you are about the industry when you talk about some of these segments, it's very, very inspiring. A very commendable job. I hope you inspire a lot of the viewers who are watching the show. And thank you for coming on.
No, thank you, Vivek. And it's a pleasure being here. And my request is do provide my email to any of the viewers in the comments. And I would love to interact with youngsters who see this and then have any questions. I'm happy to answer that.
Great.
As long as they don't ask me for that $1 million check.